Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hello, ladies.
Hello, hello.
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 Yay.
Hola.
Hello. So we, as usual, I have my fabulous co-host, Kate Sitars, with me. But we are also delighted to do a check-in with one of our fabulous CCA students, Alicia Castro. Hello, Alicia. How are you?
I am super excited to speak to you both today, ready to just talk all things copywriting.
Dive in and go for it. Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the reasons that we wanted to check in is because, first of all, because we just adore you. You're a fabulous human being. But also because your episode of the podcast was, it continues to be very, very popular. I think one of the things, so I was going to say spoiler alert. It's not a spoiler because we're telling everything here. But in your original episode of the podcast, we talked a lot about how you balance having a full-time job and writing copy part-time. And I know that that was super inspirational for a lot of people who couldn't even conceive of how that is possible. And not only is it possible, but you continue to thrive at it. So what does let's just jump right into it. What does your work look like now? Are you still full-time and part-time? And exciting.
Yes, so I am still full-time. I do SEO at a marketing agency. I think during our last interview, I was just getting started in the field. So there was a lot of learning and a lot of extra hours built into that process. And so that changed slightly. Now I'm at the point where I'm managing people and I'm talking to clients more directly. So it's still an interesting balance between figuring that out and kind of being on from 9 to 6, doing that kind of work, and then finding a balance to have enough brain space to be able to write copy either early in the morning or late at night. I would say that it's still difficult, right? But I have a much better handle on it than I did prior. And that's because I've really created a regimented schedule around what type of work I do when. I can't control what I'm doing during my 9 to 5. If I need to get on a meeting a particular day because that's when everyone's available, I need to do that. However, I realized after a few years of just doing all the things all the time that it was very necessary to create different days where I focus on different parts of the business. So a great example of this was writing copy, right? When you're actually in there in that focus mode and you're writing, I realized that I could not do that on the same day I was taking a bunch of calls for my business and for work. And so I actually created a schedule where you write on Tuesdays and Thursdays and maybe a couple of hours on the weekend. You take client calls only on Wednesdays because that's also when I have a bunch of client calls at work. And so I kind of have batched a lot of similar processes together, and that's helped me really figure out how to balance having a full-time job and also having my own, in a way, full-time business on the side. That's a bit of a kind of contradiction, right? Full-time and on the side. But the way that I think about it is it's not a side hustle. It is a business, right? And I think that shift in mindset is also what helped me make that switch and realize this is how things need to operate. And I'm in control of my schedule. I get to decide how my business looks and feels. And because I have a 9 to 5 job, and this was a huge aha moment for me, I have the luxury of being able to choose how I want things to be. So I don't need to take client calls 5 days a week. I don't need to write copy every single week. I don't need to take every single client that comes my way. Because I'm doing this during my free time, it's really up to me to figure out what works best for me, what's gonna improve my business and skyrocket my business in the direction that I would like it to go in. And what really excites me. I think that's the most important piece, right? What excites me, what gets me rolling out of the bed early in the morning before I have to go to my regular job, and what gets me, ooh, I would love to do this even on a weekend when all my other friends or family are doing things. So that's kind of how I've been balancing the 9 to 5 and own business at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's just so insightful. Good for you for recognizing that Because honestly, it took me a lot of years to separate out client calls from work, because to your point, client calls they're exciting, but they just take a different part of the brain. And then when you're done with the call, it's very hard then to turn and be like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and write copy. So good for you for figuring that out and really taking control of your own schedule, which sounds silly because it's like, well, it's my schedule, but it can be so easy to be driven by client wants and client needs and that kind of thing. Client wants more than anything else, I guess. Yeah. Pursuant to that, I know that one of the concerns a lot of people have when they think of being a part-time copywriter is, oh my gosh, are clients going to be willing to talk with me in the off hours? Am I going to have to find a way to somehow cram client calls in during the day, or there are going to be no clients that are willing to talk to me after 5 o'clock or on the weekends? Have you found that at all?
No, not at all. It's very much, it's definitely a thought that I had, especially right before I implemented, I'm only going to take calls on this day. I've had maybe 1 or 2 people say, oh, well, I can't wait until this time. And I think it's really important for you to set boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. We are providing a service that is going to help the other person. And if this is something that they truly care about, they'll find the time, or they'll find a way to kind of adjust their schedule to yours. And I think you don't need to explain this to people. I think that's the thing that we can get caught up on. Do I need to explain what's happening outside of my available hours? But you don't need to do that. That's one. And 2, setting those boundaries is one of the key things that's important for everyone to learn, no matter what stage you are in the business, because that is the sort of thing that drives you crazy when you're writing, or when you're pitching, or when you're doing any part of the process. Oh my God, what is the client going to think? As a copywriter, we are so hard on ourselves when it comes to the copy that we write. And so I think it's as important that we do as much as we can to get rid of questions that we ask ourselves or concerns that we ask ourselves, and you just kind of have to draw a line in the sand. When you have boundaries and you set those, clients will respect that, because depending on the kind of clients that you have, right, they have already set similar boundaries like that in their business. So that's also a red flag. I think if you have clients who don't necessarily respect your boundaries, if they need something a little bit faster and you've already communicated, hey, this is the earliest that I can talk to you, or this is the earliest that I can get that done, maybe that client isn't the right fit for you, right? So those are all the different things that I think you have to think about. But yeah, definitely boundaries. I would say not to worry too much about it. You have to do your best work. And so you need to do whatever you need to do that. And as long as you get on that call with confidence, even if it's kind of a fake it till you make it kind of confidence, and you can really clearly showcase your process, clients will completely understand when you're available and when you're not. I think great clients understand copywriting takes time, right? And it takes brain space, and they're investing in you, right? They're investing in you to do this thing for them, and they want to protect their investment. So I think that's another way to think about it as well, is you're not hurting the client by setting boundaries, you're actually protecting them and helping them.
Yeah, that's so wise.
Absolutely. Kind of following up on that with deadlines, how do you set your deadlines and expectations of those with clients? Because I think a lot of folks get really hung up on, I have to start this today. We kicked off today. I have to start today, and I have to deliver the same week or within a week or whatever it is. I think we put these constructs around our time that might not necessarily exist. So I'm curious what your process is for setting those deadlines and expectations.
That's an excellent question. And it's a process that's evolved quite significantly over the past 3 or 4 years that I've been writing copy on my own. In the beginning, I think it's always important to give yourself a little bit extra time, especially when you're just starting to write. It's always good to have a chat, I think, with other copywriters and get a feel for or gauge how long does it take to do something, and know that it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to do that, right? When you're first starting off, one sales email may not necessarily take 30, 45 minutes, right? It may take 2 hours or 3 hours. I don't think you should think about that when you're talking to the client. That's sort of something that you need to kind of build into your own process. So the way that I've thought about deadlines at this point, and I think it changes as you get more experience writing, I think about what's feasible for me to do. And that feasibility includes a couple of different things. What else do I have going on in my work schedule? So within the actual business, what else do I have going on because I have my 9 to 5 in my 9 to 5 schedule? Do I have any huge audits and huge projects there? Have I built in some time for an emergency or something like that? Have I built in time for me to just sit down and absolutely do nothing? Have I built in time to think and process and kind of do a creative brief? I've got that down to a T now, but it also depends. I'm also very clear about, I cannot do a long form sales page in a week. I can probably do a short form one because I know the formula really well, and I require a lot of information from the client upfront, and I can probably do a sales sequence in a week. But again, that's because I have had a lot of experience over the past couple of years writing these things on a very fast deadline. But I think it's really just a matter of understanding, when does the client need this and what else do you have going on? You're always going to feel like, oh my God, I do not have enough time, right? And you don't need to kick things off. I think it's important to give yourself time to, one, process the call and just read through everything. The thinking time is the most important piece. We always skip to the writing part first, and spend as much time as you can thinking and researching and strategizing and planning out exactly what you're going to say and why you're going to say it. And you will be surprised how quickly the writing process goes. For anything that I've done, the writing process has probably been the quickest part. And when it is not the fastest part, it is because I did not spend sufficient time planning, researching, strategizing. So spend a little bit more time in that area, in that kind of phase before writing. So I hate to say that it depends, but it really does depend, right? It depends on your availability, depends on what's going on, depends on the client. It also depends on how big the project is, right? The larger the project, the longer it's gonna take, usually, right? So there's a lot of different factors, and I know people want to hear, oh, you should always think about 2 weeks or so, which is like a good, that's a good way of thinking about it, but it really should depend, and you should think about all those different factors before you agree to a deadline.
Yeah, the emergency time is such an important reminder of life happens. So build in that extra buffer for whatever might get thrown your way.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, life happens, but also, we're in a creative field. And I know that all of us at one point or another have sat down to do work for a client and gone, I've got nothing. I have nothing. Nothing is coming to mind in that moment. Mm-hmm. And when you don't build in work to that the way that you have, Alicia, you're stuck and you have to put something on the page, and then you end up delivering something that is not what your client deserves, because we should always be aiming to deliver the absolute best that we possibly can. So building in that buffer time is just as much for client and work quality as it is for us. Yeah. And also sometimes because things come up and we want to be able to do them. We want to have fun in our lives. If you build in some extra time and, a friend comes in from out of town that you haven't seen in forever, none of us are working. And especially you, Alicia, you're not working a full-time and part-time / full-time business to not be able to have fun and to live your life, right? If all of your hours are booked up and you have no flexibility, then what's the point? Yeah.
I think that is such a great point that you bring up, Nikki, because that has happened to me so many times, right? So even with this schedule that I have in place, even with these deadlines that I have in place, I have found many times that a lot of my life is spent in front of the laptop. But that is because I have not thought about in the past, you need just fun time. You need time to watch Netflix. You need time to take a walk, right? We're so busy thinking about, oh goodness, I have this thing that's coming up. I have to get started on this, or I have to edit this, or the dreaded when you do your first draft, oh my God, this sucks, right?
Mhm.
We get so caught up in that we forget to actually live life. I don't remember where I read this from, or at rather, but copywriters cannot be great if we don't have stories to tell. So we actually do need to live life, right? It's in some ways part of your job description, right? Of course, you can pull stories in from clients and from other things, but it's those everyday things, those everyday comparisons, those small moments. That's where you get a lot of your gems from, surprisingly. And I have noted that every single time I have built in fun time or time to do nothing or time to just let a draft sit there without worrying that I need to get it out the next day at midnight, that the client comes back and is thrilled and amazed by what I wrote. Yeah. And so that's a huge piece, right? And to your point, you don't do that, right? You do not want to build a business or a system that just requires you to be in front of the laptop, right? And that goes back to the boundaries piece, right? Not taking on too much work. And these are all things that you learn and you continue to learn. We don't ever get it right. There's sometimes I've gotten that super right and I thought, okay, this is the right balance. And there have been other times where, oh, I have this client that it's so amazing. I really, really love it. I already agreed to this project, but then I have my previous client who it's much easier to write it. So then I'm kind of balancing 2 or 3 things at once. So again, there's a balance to it. But it's so, so important to not get too caught up in, I want to make X amount per month, or I want to do this per month, and forget that you need to live life. The whole point of doing all those things is so that you have the freedom, right? No one does any of this, I think, to be boggled down all day. And because copywriting is such a brain intensive process, you truly, truly, truly have to bake in time for you to not use your brain. Otherwise, like you said, when you get to the page, that Google Doc or that Microsoft Word doc, you're like, oh gosh, what am I writing? It's blank. I don't, right? So you have to give yourself that time.
Yeah. Why do you think, and I realize this requires a little bit of speculation, but maybe you can go back to before you instituted them. Why do you think people hesitate to instill boundaries in their business or with their clients?
Ooh, excellent question. I think it comes from fear, right? And I'll use the phrase lack of confidence, but that happens usually when you're just starting off or you're doing something new, or, I've had it where I was super confident about what I was writing, but the client was huge, for example. And so it all boils down to fear and I think imposter syndrome, right? You're not sure if you're good enough, or you're not sure if you have what it takes, or you're comparing yourself to other copywriters. It is fear of, will I lose this opportunity? Will I ever get an opportunity like this again? This is my big break. Am I going to mess it up? There's a lot. It's fear of and self-doubt, right? Fear of making a mistake, right? Because you want everything to end up okay. You want the client to love it. Feedback is important, obviously, but as creatives, I'm sure both of you have felt like this. While I know feedback is important, and I know it just gets me closer to where the piece needs to go, it is still sometimes difficult to hear, right? I still get a little bit of the heebie-jeebies when I get a client email and they have a 1 or 2 comments on, the Google Doc, or 50 million comments, right? Which that has never been the case, but you always kind of get a little bit nervous. So I think if you can set proper expectations with yourself ahead of time and realize that all of this is a learning process, then you can kind of, I don't want to say get past, because you get past it on one level and then something else happens and it appears a little bit differently, right? So it's, I would say, manage your self expectation, have a talk with yourself. We don't do that enough. We let those thoughts of, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose this client. What if? That's the steering wheel for us. And really we have the driver's license in our brain, right? And in our business, right? So we have to take back the wheel and drive the conversation inside of our heads in a different direction. and just really have that talk and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? There's some self-reflection that needs to happen. What is the biggest fear? Someone once told me fear does not like to be named. Mm. And I think that's such a wonderful quote, because if you take that out of your head and put it on a piece of paper and you can see, oh, this is why I'm scared to give this client a deadline. This is why I'm scared to do this. Then you can start to kind of write a different narrative, right? You kind of have to write copy for yourself in your head and persuade yourself of the opposite thought, right? But so that's where I think it stems from, and that's what I think you can do about it, right? But I do want to be 100% transparent when I say that I don't think that goes away ever, right? Mm-hmm. You may feel very confident about your skills, your experience, but sometimes you'll get something that you want. Sometimes you want to do such a great job that just comes up, right? And so the expectation of this is going to happen, this is normal, this is all creatives go through this in many ways. And I have the power to change how I think about it, right? No matter where it comes from. Just have a conversation with yourself. We forget to do that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I love that. The power to change how you think about it, and the power to change how you respond to things, right? Like worst case scenario, and I don't even know if it's a worst case, but if you set a boundary with a client and you say, you know, I'm unavailable for work until XYZ date, which I know freaks a lot of people out, because there's that feeling of, I had this client and I'm going to set this boundary and I'm going to lose them. And there's that idea of, first of all, I don't want to lose this client. Nobody wants to lose any clients, right, in the, big sense of things. But then also the fear that if I lose this client, are there going to be more after that? I think it does take some time for copywriters, maybe just freelancers in general, to trust the system and trust that their outreach, which they should continue to do, is going to bring people in, that this one client is never the last client, the only client out there. And those boundaries protect you to be better for your current clients and any future clients.
Yep, absolutely. And I think another thing that's important about communicating those boundaries is how you position it. I think we need to think about writing copy in all of our communication to clients, right? If you're stating, hey, I'm not going to be available until this period of time, but the client really needs the work beforehand, there's a way that you can communicate that so that the client understands you're not just saying that because you don't want to work. Maybe that is the case, right? But you're not just saying that. You can communicate it as, this is when I'm next available. You deserve the right amount of time, effort, concentration, attention, whatever it is, so that your project will be as big of a success as you want it to be. And you don't necessarily have to say it like this, but I can't dedicate that if I start any sooner, right? You deserve that time to yourself. And you make them feel special and remind them that you want to do your best, and this is how you will do your best. I think you can kind of get over some of those objections that happen.
Yeah, it's the benefit to them.
Yeah. They're so insightful, and I want to underline that, metaphorically underline it so many times, that shooting off an email to a client should also be copywriting. That is so insightful, Alicia, because every time we're communicating, we should be focusing on the benefit to them. We should be focusing on what action we want them to take, or any of those kinds of things. So insightful.
That's it reminds me of asking when you send off, the first, not your first draft, but the first draft that the client is going to see, to ask for, give them a deadline for when you need feedback back. And I think that's another thing copywriters are afraid to do, but for that email, that's the call to action. I need this by this date so that I can turn it around for you by X date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That's a big one that comes up, right? And I've had plenty of times where I finish up a project, and depending on who your audience is, right? I write for a lot of six-figure membership creators and course creators, right? And so they're busy just off running their business, right? They're doing all the things, and so sometimes I can get lost for them. And they'll, I've had folks come back a week, 2 weeks. I even had a client come back 3 months later for revisions. Again, I think it's very important in that communication, to Kate's point, to state this is when I need it back by, so that we can make sure that all of your ideas are implemented and you can get this thing launched, for example. Sometimes you can have that in your contract where you have, you're very specific about, if you don't respond back by 7 business days or that sort of thing, you consider it closed. I've seen copywriters do that. I do think you also need to be a little bit open, depending on the clients, depending on the kind of relationship that you want to build. But don't be scared. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it, because the moment you say don't do something, you want to do it, right? It's okay to feel scared about setting boundaries, but you are not going to be able to do the good work that you're scared you're not going to do if you don't set the boundaries, right? It's kind of a catch-22 there. So yeah, be very clear with your clients. This is when you can expect this. This is when I need something back from you, and that sort of thing. And every client is different, right? And you need to do some tweaking around with certain clients, but you get to decide who you do that for as well.
Well, and sometimes the things that we think of as boundaries are really guidance for our clients, because clients are not professional clients, right? They don't necessarily know the best steps of the timing. So it is helpful for us to send our draft through and say, here it is, keep an eye out for this. And this is where I incorporated this. And also, just to make sure we stay on schedule, I'll ask for your feedback by X date. That is helpful to the client, because then they know what the next step is. They know how it's supposed to go. They have something to put on their schedule. Otherwise, clients who are brand new to being clients or have never worked with copywriters before, never worked with creatives, kind of can tend to let things go because they're not sure what the next step is. So it's doing our clients, yes, it's a boundary for us, but it's also doing our clients a service by helping them understand what the next step is and letting them know what to do next.
Absolutely. Our job really is to make our clients' lives easier. Some of them may know how to write copy, some of them may not know, but they've trusted us to do this job for them. And so they kind of don't really want to think about all the things. And that's actually, I think, how you're able to charge more and more when you're thinking about your client experience. How easy can you make it for your client, right? So don't think about it as a boundary like you mentioned, Nikki, but think about it as you're making it easy for your clients. And who does not like easy, right? Everyone loves easy, especially when your client is an entrepreneur. Everyone's busy, but that sort of thing. If you can make it as easy as possible for them and give them instructions, this is what I need you to do, this is what I need you to do it by, that sort of, they love that. I have always had clients love, whenever I send through my first draft, I always record a Loom video that kind of walks them through, this is what I did, this is the strategy, this is where I pulled this from, that sort of thing. Really quick overview. And within that draft, I do have a little box that says, read me first. Here's when I need things by, and here's how I want you to think about feedback, right? Because all the word choices, the sentence order, the formatting, that has been strategically chosen based on our brief, based on our call, based on my research, based on my experience, my understanding of copywriting, persuasion principles, all those things, right? So when you're going through this, these are the questions I want you to ask yourself, because sometimes clients don't know what exactly they're looking for when they get a draft, right? They were thinking it was going to be one thing and they end up with something else. And so you're very clear about, here's how I want you to think about it. Is the tone right? Does this match your brand voice? Are all the key pieces of your offering, is that reflected properly? That sort of thing. They love that, right? And that also minimizes back and forth for you, minimizes feedback. Clients are always super happy about that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's brilliant, because when a client gets something, then they don't have direction for how to give feedback. I mean, I love that you do a Loom. You can certainly, people can do live calls
Creative
taken
review,
through, but exactly, thank you. Live creative review, taking people through. I think Loom is also a fantastic option, which especially works with the schedule if you have a full-time job and you're not just available to take calls whenever. I think that clients, they don't know what to look for naturally, to your point.
Right.
So they'll get your doc and they'll go, yeah, great. And that's when I think sometimes newer copywriters like, oh my gosh, yes, they love it. Great. Move on to the next thing. And unfortunately it can be those clients who are like, yeah, great. Who then come back weeks later and are thinking, oh, actually I thought this through and now I've realized this, or now I've realized that. And then to your point, that's where you get into all of these weird cycles of revisions and all kinds of stuff that should have been dealt with much, much earlier. It's so,
or worse,
so
they
great.
hop in and they start writing copy and you're like, no. Use comments, if you really need to use the suggestion feature. Okay. But I need to see what you're doing so that we can have a conversation. I've had so many clients, I'm sure you both have as well, where it's like, whoa, you're changing this, but here's why that should not be changed or whatever.
Right. That's another, and those are the tiny little things as a part of the process that make it easier. It sounds so weird to say you restrict document access to the client, right? But whenever I send that first draft, it's comment. I give them, it's usually a Google Doc for me. You can do whatever, platform works best for you, but I give them comment only access. And I'm very clear about that up front. Leave a comment, right? Because again, this flows a very certain way. And when you go in, you disrupt that. And then, I don't say that, but that's the sort of process, right? So giving them comment only access. And then once we have made any tweaks, they get the editable version. So technically, if they wanted, they could make a copy of it and edit it on their own. But I want to make sure that we preserve the original version that I sent over, so I can see what needs to be tweaked and where, and how I can incorporate that into the existing story or change the story around.
Yeah. So much great stuff. I'm sorry, Katie, I keep cutting you off.
No, that's okay. I have two questions. They're kind of related, I guess. But you mentioned working with, six-figure entrepreneurs and membership programs. What kinds of projects, and you said earlier, taking on projects that excite you and make you want to get out of bed in the morning. What kinds of things are those for you now? And what types of things are you working on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I originally started to write copy, you're getting your feet wet. You're trying to figure out what exactly do I like. And I've had the really great opportunity to also work for a boutique copywriting agency, and they could kind of just send me whatever kind of copy they end up doing. And so I've learned really quickly, I don't really care for this type of copy too much, or this hurts my brain, or my brain just doesn't think this way. I think you also understanding my strengths, right? All copywriters need to be concise, but the shorter copy is, I think, the more difficult that it is, right? So social media, for example, copy can be, people think it's super easy, but it can be really difficult. And so over time, what I have realized is I absolutely love emails and sales pages. And that's because the storytelling piece is super exciting for me. I think of emails as mini sales pages in many ways. I think that's probably something, Kate, you shared with me, is think about it kind of like a mini sales page or a mini landing page. So that's really what I'm doing right now. Like, those sort of projects excite me. And I always ask, I love to see what the actual offer is, right? So when I'm talking to a client, the things that excite me are things that I believe will actually change. This sounds so corny, but changing people's lives, right? Or something that I know I would have needed, right? I've written for memberships for entrepreneurs who they've been doing this thing for so long, but they're still not getting the results that they want, right? And I love doing things like that. I love when you're answering or solving a very particular problem. And for me, thinking about the values of my business and the type of business owners that I like to work with, I love empowering women. I love giving women a chance for their voices to be heard, for their efforts to be seen. So if the offer is really kind of in that vein, and that's super broad, but if it's usually in that vein, it gets me super excited, right? If I know, wow, this is something that I wish I would have had, or something that I know somebody would need, or just is something really cool, really innovative. Those are the things that get me super, super excited. But also, I have clients who I've written for where it's, a regular service. So, there are thousands of other people that offer it. But what's exciting is the way that I get to write. I have a client, for example, who her style of writing is so humorous and so fun, and it uses pop culture references, and it never ever feels like writing copy. It feels like I'm writing text messages to a best friend, right? And so those are the sort of interesting things that I love to do. And I guess really kind of folks who aren't super straight chaser, for example, for me, I love a lot of the let's just have fun, let's just have a conversation sort of thing, instead of here's what you need to do in order to make six figures. It's tone and feel that make me really excited. But that tends to be the boat of things. Emails and sales pages, that's all the rage for me. And that's what makes me super excited, because I know I can deliver amazing work doing those two particular things and tell really great stories.
I love that. Fantastic.
So what's next? Are you continuing to balance both? Do you have thoughts about the future?
That is a great question. I go back and forth, right? There is so much experience that I've gained working at a marketing agency or advertising agency. I get to work on a lot of big name clients, right? And that is one of the ways that I was able to propel my copywriting career when I first started, because I kind of had some credibility, because I've written a few things here and there from an SEO perspective, which includes copywriting, right, for these big name clients. But there's also a part of just the agency world where you get to work on a whole bunch of different things. You get to see how the process, how do you work with a web designer, right? How do you work about how do you think about this? How does this particular thing fit inside of the larger marketing strategy? That's a huge skill that as you start to grow your copywriting career, you realize that you're not in a silo, and that your writing needs to match whatever else is happening with the brand. So there's so many wonderful insights that I gain that I often wonder, do I want to leave this? Right. And I think that I'm not at the point yet where I am ready to let that go. I think there's still so many amazing things that I want to learn there. And so much of what I've learned, I've absolutely applied. And that's how I've been able to skip the struggle a little bit in some areas. Okay, I see that this does not work in the agency world. Maybe it might not work here. Oh, this is this cool thing or cool way of thinking. Maybe I can apply that here. So I'll still be doing both of them for quite some time. But my focus for my business has been, I've been niching down a lot more. So beforehand, I wrote all types of copy for all types of folks. And I'm very specific now. And so I've actually kind of changed my business model. Beforehand, I used to think about things from a project perspective. And I noticed sometimes that projects would drag on for weeks, months, that sort of thing. And I realized, well, since I already kind of know, I already tend to write these things pretty quickly anyway. And the longer the project is, the longer I get into my head of, oh my God, is this the right thing? Maybe I need to cut that period down. And so I've actually started offering, you'll hear in the coaching world and the entrepreneur world that a lot of people do VIP days. Some copywriters do that. I think that's too short of a time frame. It just calls for brain fog and brain freeze. But I've been doing kind of a VIP week. So I'll take 7 business days, and I'm very clear about what I'm able to do in that time frame, right? I can write a welcome sequence. I can write this sort of thing. Here's what I need from the client ahead of the call. And again, I have a very regimented process about that. Here's what I'm going to do the day of the call. Here's what I'm going to do the next day. Here's what I'm going to write. And so I have enough time in that 7 business days where if I wanted to deliver the work a little bit early, I could. But I have thinking time, I have researching time, I have writing time, I have editing, proofreading, all that other stuff time. So that's really what I'm doing right now is I'm leaning into that a little bit more, right? And so that allows me to specialize and really get super great at emails and sales pages in that time frame. And I can quickly see what's working, what's not working, how can I tweak this? So it's kind of become more of a productized service as opposed to thinking about it from a project perspective. And so that's kind of the fun thing that I've been exploring recently.
That's good. Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. It's such a flexible career and it's such a creative career. So explore, right? Good for you for looking at the different ways that you can approach things. And quite frankly, looking at the different ways that you can market things is worth exploring too, because effectively, right? Like we are of the same mind about VIP days. They're crazy, but I love the concept that you market it as a VIP week. But on your side, it's really not that different from being like, okay, I'm going to dedicate my schedule. I'm going to do this work for this client for this week. But putting it in that marketing mindset, the client goes, ooh, look at this super special thing I'm getting the VIP week. I think that's very, very smart.
Right. And it kind of ends up being the same time frame. It usually is the same time frame for me anyway. But again, it's the positioning, right? That goes back to what I was mentioning beforehand. When you have VIP days, for example, it's you have my eyes, my ears, my attention on you for 8 hours. That's great, but sometimes people can have a bit of a price objection because VIP days have a pretty premium price tag. But when you think about it from a VIP week, oh my goodness, this person is going to be focusing on my business for an entire week. One, you don't get those price objections. I haven't had it at all. Probably will at some point or another, depending on the kind of, who knows, right? But they love the idea that, oh my God, this person is going to do a deep dive into my business, and they're really going to understand all the different needs and all the different wants of my target audience, and they're going to be obsessing over me for an entire week. That is so exciting. Clients absolutely love that. But it literally is the same exact thing that I've done beforehand. I just marketed it differently. So
I love that. Brilliant. Yeah. So speaking of which, if anyone is listening and they're like, oh my gosh, she's amazing, I want a VIP week, or I want to work with her, where can people find you? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, the best way is to go on my website. It is gloriouscopy.co, and find me on the Work With Me page and just submit an inquiry. And let's talk. I'm taking on new clients. Spaces are filling up fast. I'm already booked out for this month. But again, if anyone is interested in getting some really personality infused email sequences or a super great sales page that just makes their clients go, oh my God, where's my wallet? I love this. I needed this. Where was this all my life? I am your girl. Come find me at gloriouscopy.co.
Yes, she's fantastic. So if anybody's listening and thinking, reach out. She's fantastic. Alicia, this has been so much fun. And already in my head, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to check back in another couple of years and see where her business is then and see what's happening there. But this has been really fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for catching up. Thank you for all of the fantastic wisdom and insight you've offered. I know our listeners are going to love it.
Oh, awesome. It's been my absolute pleasure. And I wouldn't have been here if I hadn't been a part of the Comprehensive Copywriting Academy in the first place. So it's always nice to come and check back in and let people know how things are going. I think that's important, right? We all start somewhere and there's growth, and it's important to see that. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.